It's the most exciting time of the year, and often we wait with eager anticipation. We think we understand it, but it has many sides. Springtime in Europe. We follow it from the plains to the mountains, from the inlands to the sea, from the warm countries in the south to the cooler climes of the far north. Long winters with their icy temperatures give nature a chance to recuperate. But each spring, a small miracle takes place. With the warmer temperatures, new life returns. Unrelenting and with a frenzy of activity, it travels across the continent until it eventually reaches the shores of the polar seas. As the sun climbs over the peaks, the valleys in the Alps are still bitterly cold. It's only gradually that the shadows give way to a space filled with light, awakening a black grouse to his courtship rituals. As the snow melts and a new season begins, everything is set in motion. The winter offers its last resistance near the tree line, in the shadow of the mountains. The small ponds have just thawed, so forbidding as it may appear, it is already beginning to teem with life. Grass frogs stir out of their slumber. The ice-cold waters are already full with spawn, but the males persevere and wait for more females. They've all spent the winter buried deep in the earth next to a small stream. It's only when the morning sun is warm enough that they spring to life. Nevertheless, small breaks are always necessary. It's always laborious to cross the large snow-covered field. At its peak, the courtship transforms this pond into a watery male choir. The ceremony continues over some days, until quiet again returns, as if nothing had happened. Spring days in the high mountains. The sun in May stands high in the sky, ebbing away at the last remains of the snow. The deep valleys remain in shadow for half of the year. But as soon as the sun and the warmth have covered the peaks and the ridges, spring is returned to the landscape. The young marmots are forced out of their burrow in June. They were only born at the end of April, and it's their first springtime in this strange new world. Young marmots are very playful, and if no playmates are to be found, then the mother has to take her turn. An elder still gives warning when a herd of ibex nearby starts to move. Soon they will get used to their neighbours. The ibex from last year are beginning to shed their winter coats and are preparing themselves for the seriousness of life before them. Soon these playmates will be arch rivals. There is so much new to discover. The herds of ibex separate at the end of winter. The mothers are with their offspring, leaving herds exclusively with males. The hierarchical dueling is at an end. The food is growing, time for a spot of intensive leisure. The older ibex develop powerful horns, sometimes very practical, but more often just a heavy load. All clear. Now there is movement again within the smaller colony. The young marmots are proper little bundles of energy. Every day of spring for them seems to be just one more big adventure. The melting of the snow in spring and the periods of rain in the North Alps produce colossal quantities of water. With an irrepressible force, they flow along their way. Over the centuries, the cascading waters have cleared deep paths within the valleys. It is only at the foothills that they eventually slow until they reach the south of Germany. There, the spring has already begun in April, 8 weeks earlier. The cherry blossoms on the Swabian Alb are in full bloom. After them come the apples and then the pear trees. These orchards have been naturally tended over hundreds of years. No fertilizers or toxins pollute the ground. The first signs of spring have arrived. Starlings. The old fruit trees are full of cavities, as if made for the cavity nesting birds. The loud and hungry cries of the young starlings keep the parents on the move for nearly the entire day. The little nest dwellers grow quickly. the nest soon becoming too small for them. All of them push and shove to get to the light. First come, first served. The orchards are home to numerous communities, with their tall trees and 3,000 different sorts of fruit growing on them. More than 5,000 plants and species of wildlife have made their home over the fields. An umbel covered with eucinetid beetles shows what an overwhelming variety of insect life abounds. It's no wonder the starlings, among others, have such easy pickings. Western marbled whites and six-spot burnets collect pollen and nectar. Swarms of wild and honeybees are also out foraging. It's only thanks to their pollination that the trees carry fruit. A harvest can be ruined if the spring is too cold and rainy. A sea of flowers is created under the apple trees when in full bloom. Dandelions, sage, wild carrot and daisies. A blaze of colours as only a warm spring can produce. A further wonder, meadow salsify spreads out across the landscape. The orchard's fields are mown late, following the bloom when the plant seeds have fallen. That's also an explanation for the extraordinary variety of the countryside. At the bottom of it all, covered by leaves, a field cricket has built his nest. Unflaggingly, he tries to attract a female to join him in his quarters. The shrill call of the cricket is produced by rubbing his wings together. Next door, an early nesting bumblebee is searching for nectar on this clover. A little shelter would also be a good idea. Perhaps another one is free. Above the fruit trees, extensive beech forests cover the summits. Their bald crowns are still reminiscent of the winter, but the spring sunshine is warming the ground. After many weeks of cold, things are beginning to warm up for the wild boar. A small sounder roams through the forest, a mother with her piglets from last year. The male boar is not tolerated within the group. They live apart and alone. The boars can still find beech nuts underneath the leaves if the forest's trees have carried enough fruit throughout the autumn. In March, the piglets are born. For 2 months, they keep their striped coat, and then it begins to fade. Still new to the world, they burrow intensely, looking for tender shoots. The newborn are very lively and are never averse to a little scuffle with their siblings. Although they may be ready for their first solid foods, Most of all, they still love their mother's milk. The piglets have to work hard before the flow of milk starts. At the bar, there is a strict order. Each newborn has its own teat. An alternative is not tolerated. Suddenly, as if by magic, the ground under the beeches is green and filled with wild daffodils as far as the eye can see. At the top of the trees, soft needles and leaves begin to grow. On sunny spring days, the trees and bushes are flooded with light. How much more beautiful can springtime be? Some forests experience a blue wonder. A sea of bluebells has spread out across the forest's floor. Then it is the turn of the corydalus to decorate the forest. The early bloomers have to hurry. Soon it will be dimmer as the leaved roof of the forest closes in. There are only a few light weeks left for the seeds to ripen. At the end of May, the fruit trees blossom as past its peak. The splendorous white is in turn replaced by a luscious green. The young great-spotted woodpeckers are nearly full grown, which in no way diminishes their appetite. Woodpecker cavities are much sought after. A starling has already seen his chance. He'll have to wait another year before he can move in. Even after the young ones have fledged, the holes are still a good lodging for the night. Natural orchards are a precious landscape, and it is only around the Alps where they exist as such. As the petals fall to the ground, the end of the spring draws near. In the northeast of Poland, there is another landscape and another spring. The regions of Narew and Biebrzę change sluggishly in hand with the reeds, willow bushes and extensive peatlands. With the swelling water levels in April, however, the area is covered. For the roughs, this is very inviting. They've just flown back from Africa. They've travelled 5,000 kilometres already and still have many more before them. Here in the floodplains, they stop for a break before the final leg of their journey to the north of Scandinavia. The males are already showing their colours. However, their full costume is not yet ready. That will take some further weeks. With the high waters come the first spring flowers, marigolds. Although the flooded plains are a blessing for the roughs, it doesn't make things easy for the marsh's plants. They have to grow fast enough that their petals stay above the rising waters. The area will soon be filled with grazing cows when the rivers have returned to their beds. For now, the watery landscape has inspired an enormous gathering of water frogs. They have to be a little careful exactly who they attract with their loud calls. White storks are on patrol across the wet fields, and frogs happen to be one of their favourite items on the menu. It pays here to keep one's eyes open. The rich variety of wildlife across the river flood plains of Poland is overwhelming. Nowhere else in Europe can one find so many storks as here. Across the country, it's estimated that there are around 40,000. A little higher up in the reeds, the reed warblers are balancing. Their whole day is spent toiling away with their rasping call. On a spring evening, the air is filled with the calls of the tree frogs and the toads. At first tentatively, their sound soon reaches a deafening crescendo. Where else could one hear such a concert? The small fire-belly toad is only a few centimetres big, but when puffed up, their call can be heard for kilometres around. On the banks of the valley basin are extensive sedge marshlands. In the spring, one of the marsh's shyest birds gives a most special performance. For the male great snipe, looking for a partner among the high sedges is much too laborious. They prefer to congregate in smaller areas and let the females come to them. For weeks they call out late into the evening hours. Time and again their calls falling on deaf ears. As the sun sets on the horizon, the storks are already settled together in their trees for the night. In the cool of the night, all is transformed into a landscape of fairy tales. Hesitantly, the sun disperses the morning mist, and another warm spring day in May begins on the floodplains of Poland. Further north, beyond the Baltic Sea, a more sparse side of spring is found. However, on the inlands of the Swedish coast in May, there is a new start. With the help of favourable winds, the cranes have arrived after their long journey from Spain. With them come flocks of whooper swans. The days here are very cool, but that doesn't prevent them from commencing their courtship rituals. The grasslands around Lake Hornborga offer the cranes and the whooper swans an impressive stage. Every day as the sun rises, the mating grounds are already fully occupied. As the first birds begin to move, it's not long before the others are infected by the movements. Suddenly large groups get caught up in the festivities. The last pairs find each other on the shores of the lakes and recuperate new energy after their long flight. For many of the cranes, their journey is at an end in the south of Sweden. Others fly further afield to the North Scandinavian highlands, to the edge of the taiga. There, the winters are icy, sometimes unrelentingly. Snowstorms can still sweep across the landscape late into the spring. But very quickly, sometimes overnight, everything can change. Strong currents of warm air amass and the snow begins to melt. All is now in flow, and soon the slopes are dotted with brown patches. On the banks within the willows, the first catkins are already in bloom. The bumblebees are the first guests. In contrast to bees, the bumblebees' flight muscles produce enough warmth to allow them to fly on cooler days. In May, the reindeer appear from the forests. They all, the mothers with their new calves too, will spend the spring and the summer in the treeless tundra. Although grass and lichen are sparse, their pastures are near without limits. There's no reason for conflict. After the first warm days, there's no holding back. Rivulets are transformed into rushing creeks. Finally, the ice of the great rivers breaks. In Norway, one of the most mountainous and water-filled countries in Europe, the spring floods gather momentum quickly, eventually reaching the coast of the Atlantic. At the foot of the sea's cliffs, a meeting of guillemots is underway. The birds spend most of the year on the high seas. It's only for a few weeks in the spring that they come on land to breed. At the base of the cliff, there's time for a little bath, while above, the business of breeding is underway. Bird rocks are like cities in the sea. On every level, a different species of bird is nesting. Red feet and a cheeky glance are the characteristics of the clowns of the seas, the Atlantic puffins. Not all have yet mated, and so some persistent billing and cooing is needed. The action is a great breaker of ice between the birds, even between partners. It's been a while since they were so close. Out on the sea, they keep their distance. During the breeding time, the puffins go on convivial air tours. It helps them to familiarize themselves with the steep cliffs and also to slowly get used to breeding within such close proximity. Sometimes it's more reminiscent of a buzzing swarm of insects. Puffins breed on the gently sloping areas between the hard face of the cliff. They use crevices or deserted rabbit holes. If one is not at hand, then they have to dig. When she is happy with the shelter, a new family can be started. Colours as if found in a tropical sea. The coastal waters of Norway are known for their abundance of fish. It's no wonder that millions of seabirds congregate here. Thanks to the Gulf Stream, it's not only the spring but also the winter that remains mild. The stony hills also offer shelter against the surf of the Atlantic. Small cotton grass moors have formed behind the cliff face on more level grounds. The coastal mountains stretch for as far as 2,000 kilometers along the Atlantic, far to the north all the way to the Arctic and to the barren tundra. In the sparse bushes, redwing. In the few weeks of the spring in the Arctic, there is no time to lose. The whimbrels, within only 4 weeks after the thaw, have already produced their young. The chicks, despite lively, are still on unsure footing. Their downy plumage is still very thin, and the constant winds cool them very quickly. Some motherly warmth is much sought after. The young calves of the reindeer are reliant on the nutritious milk of their mothers for quite some time. There's plenty for all, and the vegetation now grows abundantly. After a short break, they're on the move again. Reindeers are nomads and cover great distances in their foraging. They're not really dangerous for the breeding dotterels, but rather unwelcome. Their hooves can easily destroy their nests. Dotterels are quite extraordinary, in that it is not the females that brood, but instead the paler male birds. She provides up to 3 partners with one nest, so they can raise far more young. If an intruder gets too close, she will try to distract him. In an attempt to lure him away, she feigns being injured and an easy prey. Her herbivores such as the reindeers, however, are not particularly interested. She can breathe freely again, even if it was a false alarm. Plants in the Arctic have an especially difficult time. Their only protection against the cold is a thin layer of snow, and they remain tiny like these on this pasture. They grow slowly. This glacier buttercup takes 7 years to grow from first bloom to full seed maturity. Sometimes the spring in the Arctic doesn't begin until June, but thereafter very quickly. The array of flowers is then truly stunning. On the expansive moors, cotton grass and cloudberries. In sheltered valleys blooms blue heath, and on the areas whipped by the winds, white dryas. In the warmer years, one can find Iceland poppies with their glowing yellow colour, covering the cliffs until the edge of the coast. Around the cliffs, June is rush hour. Black-legged kittiwakes brood tightly together and can find a place on the steep climbs along the narrow edges. Not far away, 2 nearly full-grown ravens are waiting to be fed. The parents are never far away and keep them, as well as the neighbours, well in sight. Ravens are fearless robbers of nests, and gull chicks are easy prey. Every day there's a new attempt. Perhaps the diligence of the seagulls is unnecessary. Perhaps the attention simply gets on their nerves. Fortunately, the young ravens will soon fledge. Black-legged kittiwakes breed so close together that their territory reaches only to the edge of their nests. This way they can better protect themselves against predators such as the raven. Chicks have hatched in nearly every nest. However, danger comes less so from predators, but more so from the changing moods of the Arctic spring. Sea fog from the polar sea can, in a matter of minutes, envelop the entire coastline. If it remains, then foraging for the young can be very difficult. On other days, the polar sea throws up enormous crashing waves. The spray can cover the entire cliff front if winds are unfavourable. The gulls have instinctively built their nests high above the level of the surf. Seabirds such as the black-legged kittiwakes can weather the storm. Such rough weather is not without its advantages when one has survived. The wind and the waves have washed up leaves of seaweed, each with countless forms of small sea creatures. For the dunlins, ruddy turnstones and ruffs, this is a banquet. The gulls take advantage of the situation and search the water surface for all that has been thrown up by the surf. There's no swarm of birds without food from the sea. Sun, wind, and the thawed waters have cleared the snow, even at its highest points. It's only in the more shadowed river valleys where the last remnants remain. A very special place has been cleared. The roughs have been waiting especially for this chance. Mating grounds are filled with tradition. The males return over decades for the chance to display themselves. Each plumage is quite unique. With showy ruffs and wigs, they are dressed to the nines, looking to impress not only their competition, but also the females. Patiently and attentively, they wait until something stirs on the horizon. It could be a female. Jumping into the air, they jostle for attention. Even from as far away as 100 meters, they can recognize the female of their own species. If they manage to make an impression, then the more soberly colored females will land. Immediately, the birds crouch to appease their potential suitors. Some literally lie at the feet of the females. They can maintain this humble position for minutes on end. Other males join the arena. They don't want to miss out on anything. Their humility soon softens their initial scramble. Each male defends only a tiny territory. It is only there where he has a chance of success. Throughout the day, fiery conflicts flare up. This can be a very arduous process. But perhaps it has all paid off. They've made their impression. Simple bystanders also don't have an easy time of it. They can also quickly become embroiled in it all. The roughs fight without fear of consequences. Competition is tough. If the females remain indecisive, well, such rowdiness is very tiring. For weeks on end, the tournament continues back and forth until the eggs are laid in the nest. Then the warring males can relax until next spring, when it all starts again. South of the tundra lies the primitive taiga, a seemingly endless coniferous forest that stretches from Scandinavia to the Pacific. Without so many impacts of the Arctic Ocean, spring in the taiga can be sunny, warm, and dry. It is a still and silent world, which has its own particular magic. The forest stretches out to the edge of the waters. This is bear territory. A mother is underway with her 3 cubs. She has spent the winter in her den, an abandoned anthill where her cubs were also born. The cubs still have the white collar with which they're born. The mother senses something that makes her nervous and directs her offspring up the tree. Thankfully, bear cubs are excellent climbers. All clear. It's only cubs from last year that are looking for food with their mother. Procuring food in the springtime is time-consuming for all. Here and there they can find insect larvae or perhaps some blueberries that have survived the winter. Brown bears will eat nearly anything, but are primarily vegetarians. Cubs will remain in the care of their mother for around 2 years. They need a lot of time to learn how to fend for themselves, and they have to learn intensively every day. The mothers with young offspring are instinctively very protective against male bears. The mating season is not yet over. The female will be more willing if a rogue bear should kill the new and foreign offspring. The intruder runs off. It seems there is something here that makes him uneasy. The cubs have reached the safety of the tree in no time. Now it seems they have found their fun in the safety of the tree. Getting them to climb up the tree is not the problem. It seems a little more difficult to persuade them to come down again. Sometimes it requires a bit of the bear's patience. She calls repeatedly, but to no avail. She'll just have to wait for a long time. Finally, the time has come. After so much excitement, the family is finally back together again. Perhaps the cubs have experienced their first big adventure, enchanted by a bright northerly spring evening that seems to have no end in sight.